This is Mark Holmes, the program chair for Cabin Chats. Welcome again, second day of our event. I just want to say a quick thank you to Carly, Norm and Mark for a great opening to day 2 of Cabin Chats. We now have a really important panel titled, How Can In-Flight Connectivity Enhance Health and Safety on Board? This is obviously a huge topic, and to be honest, it's been referenced in virtually every single presentation, every panel that we've done when looking at IFC over the last few months. We actually have 3 great speakers to really go into this discussion today. So let me introduce them. We have Mike McConnell, who is a Halo cabin air monitoring system for L2 aviation. We have Amy Lintzbigler, Executive Commercial Director and Chief Scientist for Material Characterization, GE Global Research, and Nicole Granger, Senior Manager, Marketing and Strategy for Collins Aerospace. We're delighted to have all 3 of you on the panel today, and we're going to get straight into this discussion because there's lots for us to get through. Let me just say before I ask my questions, we would like some audience questions as well. So please feel free to ask some really tough questions to Mike, Amy, and Nicole. They will be really appreciative of those questions. So start bringing them in over the next 30 to 45 minutes, and we'll make sure we ask them. Okay. So, but in the meantime, let's get the discussion started. As I sort of prefaced in my open remarks, health and safety, huge issue for the aerospace industry right now, given the need to make consumers, passengers feel safe. Can you, I want all 3 of the panelists, Amy, Mike, Nicole, can you sort of address how your company is tackling the industry, but also secondly, how the industry can build customer confidence back? Let me start with Amy, then I'll go to Nicole, then Mike.
Sure. At the GE Research Center, we're a research center for all of the GE businesses. So we have not only our aviation business, which primarily is in the aircraft engine manufacturing space, as well as the GE healthcare business. So at the research center, we have this ability to tie, technology needed for multiple businesses together. And so for us, we early on at the research center started to look at what we could do to bring passengers back to flying. So the 3 areas we're focusing on, one being risk management, and looking at how we can overall create a risk profile for an airline, a risk profile for an airport environment, so that they know after all the mitigation steps that they have taken what their remaining risk is. The second area is advanced testing. So how can we actually do testing for respiratory infection in a high throughput environment? And then the third piece that we are looking at is the whole digital platform. How can we have passengers feel confident about their journey from the time they get out of a vehicle at an airport through to their destination? And our focus is really on not only helping passengers, but helping the airports and the airlines understand how that journey would be something that their passengers would feel confident about. And primarily, we're looking at how do we queue individuals in an airport environment so that they are not in places where there's massive congregation, and how do we actually enable this whole area to understand the type of cleaning and the scheduling for cleaning that exists in airports and in the cabin environment.
Okay, Nicole?
Hi, thank you. So we at Collins, I don't know if the audience know a lot about Collins Aerospace, but we touch a lot of different segments of the end-to-end passenger journey. So we're looking at facilitating a more seamless but contactless environment, from check-in kiosk, mobile control, biometric passenger validation, through different security and airport stages and checkpoints, but then on board the aircraft as well into like passenger in-flight connectivity solutions and onboard retail. So we're really trying to move the whole journey into, like Amy said, a more digital environment, but facilitating that touchless element.
Okay, let me go on to Mike.
Thank you, Mark. The L2 has been around for almost 25 years and has mostly all relationships with airlines. In 2019, we found a product that we thought would be very helpful and important to bring to the aerospace market. It's a product that's been in commercial buildings, universities, schools, thousands, almost 10,000 units sold and delivered, installed in buildings. And to take this air quality product as a way to put it into airlines, into cabins, and the ability of having 12 digital sensors to have a much more, with much more fidelity, determine what is actually in cabin air. It's been a dirty little secret of airlines and frankly, business and general aviation as well, to determine what is going on in cabins with air, mostly for health. Occasionally there are events, they're called fume events or cabin air contamination, bleed air contamination. And since the COVID epidemic, the idea of using a cabin air quality product to ensure that the cabin is the safest place on earth, to instill that confidence. And when we can do it wirelessly and transmit either on an event basis or real time, that makes it even more interesting for the customers, the airlines, to create that confidence and get the traveling public back to using them, which is really where we are today. Everybody wants the business traveler to come back. This is a way to build that confidence.
Okay. What would you say? I mean, thank you all for the introductions. Great starting point for the discussion. What would you say are the 3 top challenges to make the aircraft, even the airport, a healthier, safer environment? Top 3 challenges. Let me go. I'll reverse the order this time. I'll go with Mike, then Nicole, then Amy.
Well, I love the rule of 3s because that's usually all I can remember. The first thing that it would seem is we talk about airports. The airports themselves are probably more of a problem than what's happening in the cabin. I shouldn't say that, given that we have a product that's based on the cabin. The idea of finding ways to measure what is in an airport and then eradicate it to create not just confidence, but empirical data. Second thing is in the airplane itself, and that is a short-term problem of what is there, both from virus, bacteria, to just ultrafine particles, VOCs. Those are the things that are determining odors. Those are the things that are affecting toxicity in the cabin, making flight attendants, cabin crews ill. So addressing that seems to us is the second most important thing. And then lastly, a longer term solution is what will our travel look like in 5, 7, 10 years? That component is perhaps coming up. Lots of ideas, lots of capital being thrown at great ideas. Boeing just announced they have a handheld UVC product for the flight deck. These are the kinds of things. There are lots of UVC type products that are coming around. But the third thing would be a longer term solution to virus, bacteria, healthy cabin air that everybody can point to, is measurable and can be seen anywhere, say via the internet. U.S. Congress is looking at making this an edict, a mandate, to be able to, every airline flight, be able to measure cabin air and report it on the internet.
Nicole?
Sorry, I was just like, that's really interesting stuff, Mike. Being able to, report on the quality of the air and have like an air quality marker or a KPI it would really help in terms of the passenger confidence levels. I think that's really powerful. Sorry, a bit excited. So for me, from where I'm setting the top 3 challenges, like we've talked about, Amy mentioned, reducing the airport dwell points. And there really is, from a passenger and a traveller perspective, that level of anxiety in the areas where you can't control the amount of people that you're kind of being forced into an area with. So that could be at the boarding gate, just hanging around prior to boarding process, also like the jetway, or like, worst scenario for me personally is the having to dwell with all those people and then getting on to a like transportation, so a shared bus with, again, you're crammed in with people to get to the aircraft itself. So really making sure that we're able to reduce those dwell points or optimize a kind of like time-based boarding system where you have a scheduled time to show up between this time and this time, and then it's more the ability to control it more and feel as a passenger that you're able to be in charge of that, and just know that you're reducing your dwell anxiety exposure time. Things like optimizing touchless solutions where possible in like communal areas, the lavs, for example, or galleys, to ensure the safety of the crew. And then I think the minimizing of like physical touch points. So anywhere where your items that like passports, for example, physically handing over your passport to somebody else. So I can control my safety and how sanitized my hands are and where I've been, but I don't know where anybody else has been. And so you're putting a lot of trust and faith in the stakeholders throughout the entire journey. So minimizing any physical touch points like that would be of importance. And then I think, like you say, air quality, being able to report and have that standardized would be fantastic. Like you said, the cabin environment already the air quality is pretty good. If you compare it to a ground office scenario or board train or bus, we're already filtering out regularly. We're doing that air circulation, the way that the air is traveling from top to bottom as opposed to front to back. So I think that being able to provide the empirical data at an airline level, but from a passenger perspective, having like that as a TripAdvisor rating would be something that would definitely increase levels of confidence and could be the tipping point of someone who's not 100% sure whether to book their ticket to getting that transaction happening. So I would say those are my 3.
Excellent. Amy?
Yes, great. So I think, both Mike and Nicole have brought up a lot of great points, so I don't want to reiterate any of those. But one of the things that I think it touches upon a lot of what they've already said is really making information available to passengers. So you touched on that, the KPIs of the air quality, the queuing in an airport, so there isn't that social gathering aspect of it. So really just how do we actually I think that one of the biggest challenges is how do we actually inform and empower the passengers so that they, along all the different points that they've already mentioned and we've already talked about, feel like they are in the know and that they can make their own decisions. And from my perspective, that is one of the biggest issues. No matter what we put in place, no matter what mitigation we have, it's really getting that information out to the passengers and making them empowered.
I just have a follow-up question to Mike before I ask my next question. You mentioned, I'm not sure exactly your line, you're making the airport the safest place on earth in a way. I mean, is that realistically feasible at this stage to make it safer than anywhere else?
Well, Mark, it was actually that the aircraft cabin, when you're flying at 35,000 feet, if I was a marketing manager at Boeing or one of any airline, that would be my tagline, is come to the safest place on earth, completely ripping off Disney. Because the Nicole and Amy mentioned it, with when you review what actually happens in airflow, an entire 737 airflow is recirculated every 3 minutes. Think of the volume of air that's moving. It's going through a HEPA filter. Extraordinary. This is MERV 14, MERV 17 type of filtration. And then you still have fume events. You still have events where there is a horrible smell. Cabin attendants are getting sick. If you measured it, it's truly toxic. How can that happen? If we can prove and say the safest place on Earth today is not on Earth, it's at 35,000 feet in this airliner, and this is where we're doing it, and this is how we're proving it. To me, there's a story there, whether that's a story for a publication or if that's a real marketing story. But that's how you create confidence. Because today we're on a Zoom call, we become pretty familiar with that. I'd much rather be doing this sitting on a stage, on a panel, shaking hands and smiling. How do we get people wanting to do that again and feeling comfortable? Let's get on a plane and go do it.
I mean, just to follow up, I mean, it's a really interesting point you made, but yeah, you can have that safety on the plane, but you still potentially have to spend 2 hours at the airport. You know, some people like to get earlier. Some people actually like to get there 3 hours in advance. And then you have another hour when you get there, you know, long immigration lines, customs lines, baggage waiting. I mean, is the issue going to be more at the airport level than the aircraft level?
Well, that's why I started my top 3 with the airport, because the airport to me seemed, and this is my opinion rather than an L2 position, the airport is far larger than a cabin. The airport has far more touch points, really, and the ability to grow bad things, little small boogers, is much greater than in a cabin. So attacking the airport seems to be the most important thing. Lots of ways to do that. Little UVC robots. There are, as I think Amy does it, and GE has a great product called Health Pass, a concept that they're working on, which is really worth investigation. These are the things that comes with what we're not talking about, and everybody's perhaps a little fearful of, is once you can have thermal identification and then facial recognition for contact tracing, the civil liberties people may go crazy thinking we've lost all our ability for privacy, but that's the other way to say, you're healthy, you have a fever. And that's the other thing that will create that confidence. There's a whole myriad of issues that goes along with that, but we can improve the health of an airport with those types of technologies.
Nicole, Amy, did you have any follow-on to that?
From my perspective, yeah, I think the airport, like you said, it does have more touch points, more interaction with different stakeholders and groups. I think for some of the passenger anxiety research that we've been seeing related to travel has been in those congregation areas, but there is consistent feedback of what happens on board the aircraft, because I think it's once you're in that confined environment and there's no escape, you only have a certain amount of distance where you can physically remove yourself from a crowded or cramped environment. And so I think from a mental health anxiety perspective, that's where some of the focus has been put on the airline and the cabin, where I think that there is from a personal perspective, I haven't seen the research related to this, but I would think that there would be more opportunities for contagions to be passed at the airport level.
Let me a follow-up question to you, Nicole. I mean, obviously, Collins works with both the airline and the airports. I mean, do you see sort of the deal flow being potentially equal between airlines and airports when you're looking at these like new wave of, I guess, health and safety solutions? I mean, I'm just saying
deal flow.
Well,
as in like the responsibility and
yeah, I mean, are you going to? I mean, could it be like a 50-50 split between, say, airlines wanting better health and safety solutions in the cabin, or maybe even doing deals with governments or airports to actually fund, more touchless, technology facilities at the airport. I'm just sort of curious as where the split might be going forward.
I'm not 100% sure on that, to be honest. I know that there's lots of different models and lots of different discussions happening and being talked at an airline level, airport level. We're interacting with government and all the wider stakeholder group. I think that, we may see a kind of like shared approach. Obviously, there are a number of airlines and airline groups who have agreements with airport groups across the world, for example, or we may be seeing that airports want to own that because it increases their airport sanitation rating. So they're able to get more of the airlines that they want into their airport at prime slots. So it may come down to that. I don't know. Sorry.
No. It's sort of curious because previously this event, when we look back over the last 6 or 7 years, has been called the Connected Aircraft Summit. And I would say probably 90% of the discussion, more than 90% actually, has been about the connected aircraft, not the connected airport and stuff. And it's very interesting when we start the discussion today and we talk about, the potential weaknesses being more at the airport level than the aircraft level, and what's needed to be done to sort of improve the confidence just to get people into airports, let alone onto planes. So it's very interesting. Amy, did you want to?
Yeah. So I had a comment there. One of the scenarios that we often compare this to is the 9/11 incident, and then the formation of an extensive security process, right? And that security process really is almost door to door, or really airport to destination, right? And so I think in this particular similar situation, in this health related incident, we have to think of it that way. It has to be a full look at what we all can do in an industry to make the whole situation and to process healthier.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're really focusing on the humans at all of this, aren't we? And so without the person feeling confident and being able to make that airline booking, the airport infrastructure and ecosystem, there's not people there. Because there's a purpose behind them being at the airport, which is that trip. And so making sure that we focus on the end user and their needs and how we can help them get back on board, it's quite important.
We have an audience question, which is good. We've got one very early. So, and to our audience, keep them coming. This is a really interesting topic on many levels. So if you've got questions for Amy, Nicole, and Mike, keep them coming, and we'll try and get them to them. The question we have is: are there any aerospace standards being followed, used in applying these new solutions? Let me start with Mike for this one, and then if Amy or Nicole want to add anything, we can go from there.
Well, as a matter of fact, there is a FAA, 2 committees that the FAA has enacted to look at bleed air contamination and cabin air contamination. They're 2 separate committees. Their findings are expected to be presented in the second half of 2021. The intent of these 2 committees, they're SAE committees, is to establish those very standards that would become law. And this was mandated by the US Congress in an FAA Reauthorization Act. So as we're going forward, we can see that part of what I described earlier is coming from this view that the FAA has had enough interaction with constituents to say this needs to happen, to monitor and report on cabin air. So those standards that are being asked about are being developed now, debated, negotiated, whatever verb you'd like to apply to it, but they're certainly being investigated to understand what it would take. And that what it would take is not, the beauty of these is not based on economics. It's based on what is the right thing to do to monitor and report.
Okay. Amy, Nicole, anything to add on the standards being followed?
From my side, that's an area that I don't have purview into. Obviously, with Collins, we follow all of the requirements and the standards that that are needed to keep everybody flying and safe. So I assume that we are interacting with all of the regulatory bodies and following all the standards, but it's not the area that I see in.
Let me stay with you, Nicole. One of the questions I had, and I wanted to look at, and I know you've all touched upon this a little bit, but sort of looking at the technology roadmap as we go into 2021. I mean, given this is not going away anytime soon, how is your roadmap changing, and what kinds of solutions might we see from you over the next year or so? So give us sort of that sort of, you know, I mean, people have often referenced the pandemic sort of, you know, to like 911 and having a way more massive impact. You know, anything we've probably seen in our lifetime, and it's obviously a massive impact on the aerospace industry. And given that none of us in many ways saw this coming, you know, and people are going to be relying on companies, all the companies here, to come up with solutions and technologies to not just professionally speaking, but personally speaking. All of us want to go on vacations. All of us want to see family and friends. Tell us a little bit about how your roadmap is changing and how it might look like towards the end of next year. What might we see from your companies going forward in terms of these types of solutions? So I will go with Nicole, then Mike, then Amy.
Love it, you're giving the order. So from Colin's side, we have always been focused on facilitating like seamless travel and looking at that customer experience throughout the journey. And we've always been trying to push to a more digital environment. We're just having a bit of a reprioritization of, oh, sorry, there's sirens going past. Reprioritization and refocus on that activity. So like at the start of the year, the focus was on getting more passengers through existing airport infrastructure, for example, in a more seamless way. Supporting onboard passenger journey elements, so that we were really focusing on the passenger drivers and needs onboard in the cabin. That's across all of our portfolios, not just the in-flight connectivity, but looking at seats and how we interact with it. In-flight entertainment equipment, we have galleys, we have sensors, we have so many things on board. And so we were looking at digitalizing all of those elements and really creating that connected, seamless journey. The move has been like a shift in the customer drivers. So what was important for airlines and airports, moving more passengers, getting more people through, has been a bit of a reshift and reprioritization on the focus of restoring that confidence level and using the architecture and technologies and solutions in a different way to enable that contactless journey, to reduce physical touch points, to try and encourage that increased level of confidence to get people back on board. So fundamentally, most of the items are still similar. We're just looking at using them in a different way, or certain health elements or safety elements have been increased in priority. So I would say that's how it's kind of shifted. Can see from an in-flight connectivity perspective, we may see more use in things like health applications or like streaming events to support medical on board the aircraft. But I would hope that we wouldn't see too much of that, because in an ideal world, we will want people who were displaying any symptoms or KPIs of symptoms. They wouldn't even get to the airport concourse. So Yeah, I think it's been more a reprioritization of development activity rather than a total reset and restart.
No, it's interesting to hear. I'm going to use now I've got Mike answering this question next. I'll use an American term. Has the playbook been ripped up a little bit, or is it more of an evolution of the playbook?
Well, I lived in the UK for 2 years, so you can use some of the very pithy Brit sayings with me, and I love it. I would say that for L2, the roadmap hasn't changed that much. We were looking at this product, this problem, with a solution which we think is a very the best and the best solution with the most fidelity to solve this problem. And we're not going to take advantage of a pandemic, but it certainly has heightened the awareness and it's heightened the interest. What's changed fundamentally has changed are the customers, meaning the airlines and their economics and their balance sheet. They're struggling mightily with making any decisions to purchase anything. There's a saying, I'll give you an American saying, they don't have two nickels to rub together. So that's the challenge. You could have the greatest solution. If it's not absolutely killing a little virus or a little bacteria, it's very difficult to get their attention. They see it, they recognize the problem, they want to solve that problem, but they have either no cash or they have an edict not to spend money on anything that doesn't solve the other challenges in front of them. So from a roadmap standpoint, what was always, and this will sound like the shameless face lick to our host, but it was the connectivity, it was the wireless aspect of what we're developing to connect the cabin and be able to either do event-based, meaning after a flight or at the end of the day, or real time, if you have a red cast message, crew alert system type message, to say, ooh, we have a real problem here. Let's tell ops, let's tell somebody. That was the really interesting component, because once you have that network, that hub with a Halo product, you can drive other pieces of the aircraft, what's happening, whether that's through IFE, whether that's through ACARS, SATCOM. L2 has 25 plus STCs for SATCOM, so we understand Iridium and Swift Broadband to be able to use the data collected and be able to transmit it and get it off the aircraft real time if indeed there's a problem. That component was always in our roadmap, so that really has never changed. It may have been accentuated because of these horrible, terrible conditions that are hopefully temporary for all of us.
Just before I get to Amy, just a very quick follow-up to you, Mike. So is there anything that new that you're going to be doing next year, 2021? Anything that you can hint at? Or?
There are far more ideas and concepts and solutions than we probably have the ability to execute. So what has occurred is there is a new appetite for solving things that exactly what we've been talking about, creating confidence, determining what is there, determining how to eradicate, determining how to communicate on a different, more persistent level. And those are the things that are in our roadmap and what to go look at. But to be very, very, very clear, we are developing this product, we're going to deliver it, and then we move on. So we're not doing a lot in parallel right now. We have a lot of effort and tremendous brain power working on this.
Excellent. Let me go to Amy and talk a little bit about GE's roadmap for next year and what we might see from you.
Yeah, so I think I would reiterate what Nicole said. It's really a reprioritization, looking more at that digital path that the passenger would experience and how we can connect with them in a more seamless way. And for us, it's really looking at maybe ideas that were further out in that roadmap and how we bring them in. So what's the speed in which we can bring those into execution much faster? So for us in the digital platform, it's not only having an app that would help passengers with queuing and the airport with queuing, but it's also how do we get and bring in more understanding in a passive way with mobile devices and avatars interacting with passengers, an understanding of their health state based on their behavior. So bringing in that kind of very far-fetched idea of how do we actually get more information and help the passengers. And then from a sensors and assay perspective, it really is bringing in and pulling in a lot more of the development that would have happened in that space to execute on that quicker, to get more advanced testing that would actually help in a high throughput environment, such as an airport for screening. So again, a lot of speed, a lot of execution that we're just bringing in. So the technology roadmap, not necessarily different, just in a reprioritization.
Excellent. We have another audience question, which is good. So keep them coming, keep them coming. We have about 20-25 minutes left. So please get some questions to Mike, Amy, and Nicole, and we'll definitely try and ask them. I think very topical question, this one, based on the discussions so far. Healthy airports. Can it be all touchless points and guide the passengers with a personalized map to avoid touch points? Can that be, I guess, can that be done essentially? Let me go with Amy to start this one. And Nicole, if you want to maybe follow on.
Yeah, I think that is obviously a goal for the future. I see it as something we can implement on. It may require many companies to come together to implement a solution of that nature. But you can think about bringing video analytics from the airport environment, tying that to an app. And if we could have the airlines, the airports, and companies come together and create a seamless solution, I think there's a lot of potential for it to be touchless and to guide a passenger through their entire journey from the parking garage or the taxi cab that they arrive at the airport to, all the way to their destination. Obviously, things like if somebody needs to use the restroom and other aspects of that, that's not going to be touchless, right? But other things where we could think about the passport, and can you actually have the passport read without handing it to somebody, having all kinds of touchless interactions with an app that shows people could pass by a checkpoint without having to touch something. They could just kind of show an app and say that they're all clear to go. Those are the types of things I think we would need to bring to bear on this problem for it to be completely touchless and guide the passengers.
Nicole?
Yeah, I reiterate some of what Amy said. I would also like to hope that we get to a situation where we could use like in the enhancements in technology on passengers' mobile devices. It's like the use of AR to guide passengers to their specific gate or to an alternative restaurant or wine bar or whatever you fancy that isn't so busy, or highlighting a particular toilet set that isn't as frequented, things like that, just giving them a bit more information, a bit more like contextual data to help inform the decisions that they're making in that airport environment, I think would be good. But also, like Amy said, the stuff that we're working on in terms of like the biometric boarding and security gates, the using your face as your token throughout the airport environment and onboard the cabin. If we can engage that with making your face your form of payment, there are a number of things that can be done. We just need to get the time to do them all and work out which ones to do the fastest. So
I'm going to put you all on the spot with this next question, and you have to forgive me for that. I kind of just want a one-word answer here, which is always dangerous because whenever you ask people for one-word answers, they usually give you 5 or 6 sentences. But I'm going to try and get a one-word answer from you all. I mean, it sounds fantastic. This concept of a touchless airport, and very futuristic. It sounds amazing. Let's be honest. Give me a year when we will see the first true touchless airport. So I'll give you a few seconds to think.
That's not a word. You asked for a word. That's a number.
A year. Yeah, that is true.
A year. Future.
So give me a year where we will see the where we'll see this. Give us a prediction. Who wants to go first?
I think 2021.
Next year.
It's really hard. Are we in a current state environment or in a world where we have loads of just cash rolling around? Because that's going to be a factor, isn't it? It's like, I think elements of it will be in 2021. The ones that we have within our remit to control and within the infrastructure and the technology that we have now. But there's so much of this that requires multiple stakeholder inputs and interactions and information sharing and transmission. Sorry, this is far too many words. Let's go for 2025.
2025.
Few years.
Okay, 2021, 2025. Amy, what are you going to give us for this one?
I would say, would there be an example of it? I would say 2021.
Okay, that's interesting.
I hope I'm proven wrong and you guys are right, because if we can get this done in a year, bring it.
I'm surprised, but I'm also heartened because you're obviously experts in this, and the fact that you think this is even possible by 2021 is obviously potentially good news. So we'll see. When we do cabin chats next year, we'll get you all back and we'll see whether.
So just recall, December 31st, 2021 is still 2021.
Yeah. We'll give you December the 20th. We'll give you December 21st. We'll 31st even. We'll even give you the extra 10 days. But we'll see how we go. We've got more questions coming in, which is good. So let's get to them. We kind of touched upon this, but let's maybe go into this a bit more. What is stopping passengers flying at the moment? Is it confidence in airports? Is it confidence in flight mode, contamination? Is it that many countries have quarantine procedures? All of the above. Is there one factor that you think is more important than the other? What do you think the main factor is? I guess from passengers not flying at the moment.
I think it's risk management. It's like, is this trip going to mean that I'm willing to sacrifice the health and safety of myself, my family, in order to do this? And I think, as Amy mentioned, the risk profiling, is it worth potentially my life to make this trip? And so getting the confidence that that's a managed risk that's been mitigated in as many ways as possible, I think will be a way of getting that confidence back. Amy?
Yeah, I agree absolutely with what Nicole said. It really is about communicating what that risk is. I think right now, it's a complete unknown to most people, and that's one of the reasons why they're not flying. I did read a survey recently that actually said that one of the higher priorities or one of the higher reasons why people are not flying is that quarantine piece too, which surprised me. But again, that was a survey that I just recently read, so I don't have the actual reference or data to that. I just think it was quite interesting when I read that the quarantine piece was a huge huge issue for why people wouldn't want to fly. But yes, I agree with Nicole. It's the risk management piece. How do you add up all the mitigation steps that people are putting in place, and what is that remaining risk, and how do you trade that off for the passengers? Each person to make that decision is a huge part.
Well, I may offer another perspective prior to just the evaluation of risk, which is we have 4 people on this panel, and look where we all are. We're all at home. So if I got on a plane to go see Amy or Nicole, am I going to go to your home to have a meeting? So there's no place to go. Nobody's in offices. So until the risk of just going back to an office that gives some semblance of where we were at this time last year, where I would get on an airplane and go visit someone for 2 hours. Hopefully that results in a contract, a check, something. That's the reason we go meet with people. And until that comes back, where there's confidence in going to an office, no one's going to get on an airplane. These 2 people work at huge companies. They're driven more by their company policy than perhaps I am, where if I want to go meet with somebody, I'll go get on a plane. But I have to have someone to meet with, and not just at a Starbucks, to make it worthwhile.
I agree. I think that leisure travel will be somewhat different because you are dealing with kind of a wide group of passengers, and there will be different risk profiles within those passenger groups of what is acceptable and what they're willing to trade. So if for example, you're of a lower risk of contracting the disease, if you're in a lower age demographic or specific health criteria are met, you may find that they are more likely to travel. Like, people are traveling internationally now, and yes, that quarantine issue, it is an issue because you're having to factor that into any vacation time that you are able to get and to be able to afford. It's the money, it's the time, this could all change at the last minute if I start showing symptoms. So can I afford to take the risk, literally and metaphorically?
Yeah, it's real interesting. We've got some more audience questions, which is good. They're coming in thick and fast now, which is good. This is an interesting question. With the increase in personal device users with IFC, isn't it prudent that data is made available cheaper or free? A slightly different angle to I guess a lot of what we've been talking about so far. But I mean, obviously, data, information, knowledge is vital in this kind of scenario. We all want cheaper and free data, right? So, is that going to happen or not? What do we think there, Nicole?
I can kind of come back to that with assuming that they are making the statement that data made available cheaper or free to the passengers. Mm-hmm. Or to the airline, or to, it's like someone somewhere has got it. It's a resource, so that the free model could be to the passenger, where it's sponsored, or you're offsetting the data transmission costs in another way. There are different monetization models. If it's related to cheaper or free data to the airline, then we'd need to look at, again, what it's being used for, the volumes, the requirements. It's like, yes, people are going to want to use it more. Whether the passenger charging models stay the same, given that we have changed how we consume the internet now at home. Yes, we are seeing more use of streaming services and the prevalent use of personal electronic devices and smartphones, but yeah, free to who would be my counter question.
I imagine that question, I don't know if the person in the audience wants to follow up. I assume they meant free to passengers, but if I'm wrong, please point that out. One question, we do have another audience question, but I want to get to a question that I had that really I think fits in with a lot of saying. I mean, again, what we're talking about with a lot of these solutions is they are fantastic. The things are going to revolutionize the experience for passengers. However, we are seeing that the airlines are facing customer shortages, laying off huge parts of their workforce. How are these sorts of initiatives going to be sort of funding, and how can technology solutions providers enable this to happen at a time where airlines are really struggling right now? Amy, would you like to go first with that one?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. That's one of the questions I kind of, your pre-questions I kind of struggled with, because I actually don't know. I think they're just going to have to really have the value story behind any new technology that comes their way, that they evaluate and they want to implement, that it's really going to bring the passengers back, and they're going to, show the benefit of it. And so I would say I don't know if there's really new funding initiatives that are out there that help them, but in terms of their strategy, they really need to have very good understanding of that value proposition for any new technology they bring into that space, to help them, regain that confidence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, Nicole,
I was gonna say, Norm from Air Canada in prior session was talking about defining the different stages of their strategic programs, focusing on rebuilding. So looking at what they've got within an existing infrastructure architecture, and then what's going to then carry them through to the recovery stage of the airline. And I thought that was a really interesting way of thinking about it. So leveraging your current installations or architecture, current partners, working out what you can do with what you've got available, and then what you would potentially bring in to enhance that to give an incremental increase or improvement in what you've got. We are seeing lots of requests for trial activity. Again, it was mentioned in a previous session, and one yesterday where it was, we'll give you access to our aircraft and our resource and our crew, and you test your system that we may look at in the future when we're out of this. So it's that reciprocal kind of partnership activity that I think is going to help.
Okay, we've got a couple more audience questions. I'm going to try and get through these two questions. I just asked the question about airlines funding and these initiatives, and we have a question: will we see a splurge in cabin Wi-Fi retrofits for IFC post-pandemic? That's an interesting question.
Interesting. Is that I think that it will become an easier way to quantify the benefit of having Wi-Fi. I think that airlines who don't have that onboard wireless architecture, they're going to see what others are able to use it for and how that could potentially increase the passenger confidence levels or increase the health reporting, the ability for Mike's devices to report in flight on the air quality. And I think that it's going to be that could have been us. So we may see a surge, but that would require airlines to have capital funding. So it's kind of chicken and egg, I think.
Mike?
Nicole's great thought, because that was my comment exactly. It's a complete chicken or egg. Will anything you spend get people back on your airplane? In other words, change the equation for a return to higher yields, higher seats being filled? Or will that happen organically with a vaccine and the world returning to some normalcy, and then business travel returns, and then I have capital to go put into these things? So specifically as a Wi-Fi retrofit, candidly, I'd love to see it. That'd be great. I'd be flabbergasted if that's one of the first things that an airline spends on coming out of this, but that would be fabulous. Some connectivity is required for our Halo product. So if an airline does not have that, they're at a disadvantage. You have to use an Ethernet or some other way to connect into the cabin for connectivity via ACARS or SATCOM. So again, it goes back to what is going to bring people back in an organic fashion versus a non-organic, being able to incent them to come back.
Okay, let me go. Maybe we've got time for one final question. Again, we've got another audience question here. Is the conversation around monitoring cabin air quality different than monitoring engine health? i.e., has it always assumed there is some real data time monitoring, or does it still focus around a store and forward model?
I have a feeling that's directed at me, but
strangely, I had that feeling as well.
I'll be quick with this. So today, engine health monitoring is indeed monitored via the data buses. It often goes through the flight data recorder, the FDR. Some aircraft have what's called a mini QAR, quick access recorder, for transmission, and that remains the same. This is an additional data stream, and it's a matter of design choice whether you interface into that data bus to go through the flight data recorder to be recorded to do it, or to be standalone and let the ability that you've designed in for real time take hold. So it's no different than engine or any other health monitoring that's occurring on an aircraft in flight. I forgot the number, so I'm not going to say it, but I want to say the 787 has some absurd amount of data parameters that it's capturing, of which most operators aren't even using. They're using maybe 10% of the data parameters that are being captured. So we'd love to be able to integrate into that. It's a design choice on what it takes to integrate into that data stream.
Okay, we have another audience question right at the end, so we'll try and get this one. Do you think IFC can be a great boon for medical emergency if video conferencing is available on board to seek expert medical advice? Let me go to Amy for that one.
Yeah, I would say I would think that would be a huge benefit to be able to video conference in folks for expert medical advice when you're actually in a flight and there's an emergency. I think that would be a huge benefit. I don't know how possible that is going to be going forward, but I think that is definitely a huge benefit.
That facility is already available today. We've got a number of airlines within the industry who are already using that through certain providers. There's voice calls, video conferencing facility, and also like remote diagnostics of vital statistics. And so they're able to have that live engagement with a ground-based medical team. So it's something that hopefully we don't see an increase of, because we'd like to prevent anybody from getting on board who has an issue. But in an emergency situation, it is definitely something that really helps have connectivity to provide.
Okay, I'm going to get one final question in, and then we're going to wrap it up. So I'm going to ask you to try and answer this question in 60 seconds. And bear in mind, when I asked you for one-word answers, you all gave me about 5 or 6 sentences. We'll see how we get on with this one. COVID-19 has obviously spread very fast around the world over the last few months. How effectively do you think the industry has done in terms of addressing these issues and coming up with solutions? What, in 60 seconds or less, how do you gauge the industry response? I'll go with Mike, then Amy, then Nicole.
When you answer that question, it seems to me that you must answer it with it is a multiple variable equation, meaning that as you're tackling and solving COVID, you're also having a staggering decline in revenues in flights required. So you have both curves going in the absolute wrong direction. Based on those two variables, I might argue that they've done everything that they could do with the resources they've had to solve the issue that's directly in front of them. In pilot speak, they focused on the flaming engine. It may not be perfect all the time, but they did the absolute best they could do with the resources they had right then.
Amy?
Yes, I agree with what Mike said. I think they are doing the best they can with the resources that they have. I also think they are coming up a huge learning curve. And so that is another part that I think they are effective. It's just how fast can you come up that learning curve to address the issues that they're facing now.
Nicole?
I'd echo the same. Given the near impossible scenario that changes on an hourly by hourly basis, the responsiveness and the reaction in changing the entire industry business models, let alone how you serve someone food on a flight. It's been incredible, some of the changes and the reactiveness is, given the horrible situation, it's quite heartening to see the response and reactivity to the market and customer demand.
Excellent. Well, I think I'm going to leave it there. So firstly, I want to say a big thank you to Nicole, Amy and Mike for taking part in a fantastic discussion today on a topic that affects us all, not just professionally, but all of us personally as well. I'd also like to thank the audience for really engaging in this discussion and putting together a lot of great questions. I also want to salute the industry as well, and particularly the companies involved in this discussion today, who've had to pivot their businesses incredibly sharply to come up with technology and solutions that enable all of us to get back to our lives. So I wish all the companies involved in this ecosystem, from the ones on stage with us today to the ones that are listening in, all the best. The whole industry is behind you, and we wish you all the best over the year ahead. Cabin chats will resume in about 75 minutes. We have another fireside chat with Intelsat and Aeromexico. So, tune into that, because we have another airline who's going to give their perspective, and we're going to be with our good friends at Intelsat again. So we hope you can join us for that. Please feel free to use our new platform. There's networking opportunities to connect with people, to have other discussions as well. And let me thank everybody for taking part in this discussion today. It's been an absolute, it was a really fantastic discussion. Really enjoyed this, very thought-provoking. Wish everybody all the best on this one, and we look forward to talking to you all again soon. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Martha.